I have a topic idea that I can put in for next week. I meant to put it in today earlier, but I didn't. And there's plenty of topics here we can talk about. Mine is not related to anything in current affairs, but it was. I'll put it out here for you so that you can think about it. And I had this thought about if you're not or the question. So I want to phrase it as a question, and then that is, can you truly, or can you know the truth? And defining truth as that which corresponds to reality, if you're not willing to reject your existing beliefs.
It's a good topic.
I think so. I think I have something to report every time, something, about this. I've mentioned this podcast from these brothers that I used to know, or I knew 24 years ago, and they had a podcast, and I've been listening to it, and I think, so it's interesting because it's peak Southern. These brothers are from Pennsylvania, but. Well, and maybe I might be just not knowing that parts of Pennsylvania are reminiscent of the South, but there's discussion of conspiracy theories, and a lot of times it's just fun stuff. Like they talked about aliens once, but at the same time, it's like. I think I mentioned this. It's like 5G, like the antenna spectrum, 5th generation wireless radio signals is causing people to get sick. And there was this observation made. It's like the people that are getting sick, if you overlay a map of where they live versus where 5G is, it correlates. And I'm like, well, no shit, Sherlock. We don't go putting cellular antennas out where people don't live. That's counterproductive. Or where people aren't existing, yeah.
So there is a large Amish population in Pennsylvania still.
Right,
and
right.
It would not surprise me if, as a result of that, there is very much a rural Southern vibe in large areas as well.
Yeah, to be fair, I met them at a Southern Baptist church, so it's somewhat selective of a certain way of thinking. But yeah, so it was like some conspiracy theory stuff. They've dug in a bit. So here's the thing: I don't disagree with a lot of things that they say, but I do often, almost always, disagree with their rationale for saying them. So, for example. There was a comment that was made about, regarding conspiracy theories about 9/11, and I'm not sure that they've got, and maybe it's because I can't remember, but I don't think they've said, hey, this was an inside job by our government. But at the same time, it's like they did say, well, our government, allowed this to happen and allowed these people to die, and I'm like. I don't 100%, I don't think that our government allowed it to happen. I think that the United States is disliked enough by certain zealot groups in the world that it's not hard for me to accept that they did that, that some fundamentalist group attack the United States. That's not a leap at all for me. It's more of a leap for me to say that the government allowed it to happen, and even more of a leap for me to think that the government did this. Now, if you want to say the government wasn't doing a good enough job keeping tabs on people and saying that is allowing it to happen, maybe, but do I think that the government, do I think that the Bush administration, specifically George W. Bush, used it to further an agenda that he had before he came in here and to get the United States into a war with Afghanistan, and for no reason at all, no actual reason at all, get into a war with Iraq? Absolutely. Like, opportunist, absolutely. Don't have any problem with that. So, yeah, and the most recent episode I listened to, low key misogynist. I think that if you say, hey, you're kind of being misogynistic here, I don't think they'd be like, I don't even see this. So it's been interesting, but that's what got me thinking about this topic idea. That's the whole. That's why I'm talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I have an initial response, of course, but I do think I want to make it a more fleshed out show. But my initial response is no, because just because you happen upon a truth, if you are justifying it by a completely warped reality, then you're not recognizing all the nuances of said truth, which means you don't actually know the truth.
Mm-hmm. And so my thought is, like, until you're willing to abandon until you have the ability to abandon any and or all current beliefs or some subset of beliefs, you may not be able to know the truth. That's sort of my initial thought. But I think it's something we could talk about. This could be a nice little teaser for another show, because you do have a bunch of other topics in here, and I do want to hear your initial thoughts on your from your unboxing day and post a few days. So
Yeah, we can jump into that first. There's not a lot that's different, obviously. I think we even kind of talked about it when we talked about some of the pre-event thoughts or immediately post-event thoughts, that a lot of what is advertised as coming is all based around software features that the updated hardware will help take advantage of, sure. But the camera control dedicated button was a difference, at least from the previous model to the iPhone 16. And I do like it, with some caveats. It's going to take some getting used to. The ability to kind of soft press it doesn't really feel natural, because it's a haptic button. It's not an actual physical button. And so finding the difference between that partial press to select other functions versus a complete press to take a picture, that's just going to be feeling it out and getting used to it. The one thing that I did not like, though, that I didn't figure out how to change until today, by default, it does just a zoom, like the zoom wheel that you can scroll if you're physically using the interface for the camera. So it goes through all the different zoom levels instead of just going to the native camera zoom levels. By default, that's the selector, and it was real easy to mess it up, which directly impacts image quality, because there's a big difference in image quality between using the optical zoom levels and using the different digital zoom incremental levels in between them. And I didn't like that. And I kept bumping it accidentally, sliding, whatever, accidentally while we were at the Georgia Aquarium. And I just didn't like that at all. And it did not occur to me at the time to then tap on the little interface that drops down from the camera control button to choose a different function from that interface. And when I did, I could change it to just cycle through the native camera zoom levels, which is what I've done. But you can also, when you kind of half press it, if you half press it again, you can change through those functions with the capacitive touch slider piece of the button, which just means that it may not necessarily stay set if you accidentally trigger it from the button itself as well. So just some feeling out of things to get used to, but my initial impression of the dedicated camera control button is still positive. I like that it feels more like a proper camera in use. because of that dedicated button instead of just a repurposed volume button. But it also kind of feels the same as using just the volume button.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'd heard on another podcast on ATP some of the folks briefly talking about that, and I didn't hear everyone's I didn't hear all the hosts' thoughts on it, but that's similar to what they were saying, and so it kind of made me think about. I wonder how much they will tweak with in software.
I expect a decent amount. What I would love to see are some very minor default settings that the user could choose. Like if I never wanted to change between different function modes, it would be nice to be able to just choose this is what I want the function mode to be so that I don't accidentally change it to something else. And maybe that'll come. I kind of doubt it. I think that's a little too specific. But I think just getting used to the way the button works, just overall, physical feel for a non-mechanical button, just some time with it, I think will eliminate all of the problems I currently have with it.
So it's a non-mechanical button?
Yeah, it's a haptic button, so it does not actually physically depress. It's like the trackpads in that regard.
Yeah. And the home button on the iPhone 7, that was like that as well.
Correct. Yep.
And it was the 2015 was the first MacBook Pro that had a haptic feedback only trackpad button.
I think so. That sounds right.
Because I think it was right before the redesign with the Touch Bar models.
But it's kind of odd because it's also responsive to the sliding motion.
Yeah.
So it's a capacitive touch button at the same time.
Yep.
And I think just that combination requires a little bit of figuring out how it responds, just from muscle memory perspective. Because I don't think about whether my finger slides ever so slightly on a button, right? Like it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because a button's not doing anything. And I'm not normally using slider-based capacitive touch controls. Like funnily enough, there are options for those on the Canon cameras that I have, and I never use that particular control. I just have no need to. I use all the other ones. So I do get the functionality and the use case and why it's nice to have. It's just I've never had to think about whether my finger would slide and whether it would trigger an action when I'm going to press a button. And that's what I encountered over the weekend. Because I would find myself randomly zooming in or out a tick on the default control. When I was playing around with it today, when I had changed it to cycling through the specific camera zoom levels, I didn't notice that sensitivity. So I do think it's also dependent upon which control you elect to choose, which makes sense because triggering between the default cameras, the 0.5, 1, 2, and 5 on the Pro Max. Actually, I think it's the same on the Pro 2, not this year. But triggering between those, I can imagine requiring more of a emphasized movement than the little tiny tick marks for the digital and optical zoom levels.
Nice. Tell me about the black, because I saw that note.
Yeah, it just looks really good. I mean, I don't know how I would describe it other than
How does it compare to the iPhone 7 black? Because that was the last model that I guess the iPhone 10 also had a black variant.
Yeah, it's very similar. There's I don't want to call it a shininess to the titanium.
Maybe a
but
sheen?
It's not really matte. Yeah, there's definitely a reflective quality to it, but it doesn't look bad at all. It doesn't look overly polished. And then the glass has more of that subdued but deep dark black look, so it doesn't look like the 50% gray kind of thing that we've gotten at times. So it looks like black.
I like the way
it's not quite as dark as I think the I think it was the 10 that had the matte and jet, or was it the 7? No, no, it's
That's
the
the
7.
7. That's the 7.
Yeah, so it's not quite as dark as that black, but it does get pretty close.
Okay, that's good because there's been times where it's like, yeah, there's been, it's always been various shades of gray. You could, but I was wondering. So
Yeah, it looks really good. And I did go with the Pro Max model again because I have not had any issues with the 15, and I've really appreciated my other use case of using it as a viewing screen, having the larger screen when I'm using the transmitter from the camera. So I figured it was worth it to keep that for now.
well, there you go.
And that's really it for my follow up from it. There's just not a lot that's different, but we knew that going into it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm mistaken about the iPhone 10. It was space gray, which I
It
don't.
does seem like it was darker than some other models, though. And it may just be that at this point everything is so skewed because of how much they play with them.
I'm pretty sure that the. I'm fairly confident that every version of space gray is slightly different.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's on purpose.
I, I've thought about that because I'm not so sure how much of it is intentional and how much of it is a byproduct of tweaks to the alloy used.
Right. I'm thinking that I was thinking that maybe it has to do with tweaking the alloy, and so I don't know. So um, yeah, it's I do like that they a long time ago. I'm pretty sure maybe it is with the iPhone 10 that they made the white one have a black front. I can't remember, but it's not long. If it wasn't the iPhone 10, it would have been the 11. But
Yeah, I think they did it with the 10, but I don't remember for sure.
so anyway, cool. Any other?
Not on the iPhone. I mean, it's been enjoyable to use, but there's not really anything different. And to compound it, I was running the beta for long enough before that I just don't have any first impressions or anything from that because those are long
Yes.
overdue.
Yeah.
So I think with Apple Intelligence will be where I have my next iterative. Oh, this is interesting. This is nice. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, what storage capacity did you get?
512. I actually have an Lexar SSD on order specifically designed for use with the phones to do higher quality video capture direct to the external device instead of relying on the internal memory.
Yeah.
Technically, it was crowdsourced, but it's Lexar. I mean, whenever they decide to produce and ship. I don't have an exact time frame for shipping, but it's not far off. But that I already had that planned, and so I knew that I didn't need to worry about increasing storage capacity to play with the other formats, specifically the whole 4K 120, which I have not played with yet.
Cool. Have you messed around any with the JPEG XL settings?
Not really. I don't necessarily like the concept in the first place. Like I would rather shoot RAW personally and then have the JPEG as a preview or a separate file. I did glance at them. I just need to do more reading to see if there's a reason for me to change my workflow or if it's just leave it as is.
I don't know if I have any other questions about.
Yeah, I figured I would wait a second just to make sure because I was going to transition to small item, but were you ever a big Linkin Park fan?
It's so interesting that you asked this question today. I did like their first album. I do like their music. I wouldn't say that I'm a fan in the sense that like I know their albums, I know their music. I know whatever their most popular single or most heard single from their first album. I know that from the Hybrid Theory. And the reason I say it's interesting is because I was listening to them this week because my son Luke sent he sent a link to me. He's like he just sends me stuff without any context whatsoever. So I assume that he heard this song, "What I've Done," and wanted me to hear it, and I liked it, and it was good. And so I that day from school, when I picked them up, I played "One Step Closer." That was their big song from the first album. So familiar, like their music. Didn't quite follow them closely enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm a big fan of theirs. But I did see him. I saw him in concert in 2000. No other numbers, just the year 2000.
Nice. I never saw them in concert. I was not. I don't know that I would say I was a huge Linkin Park fan, but I did appreciate what they did, and I was at least I semi followed and didn't really follow, if that makes sense. Meaning that I would at least know kind of what they were doing, and some of their music I enjoyed. Some it could just be whatever. Um, Kind of like I do with most artists, to be honest.
Except for Garth.
Yeah, but I noticed earlier this year there was a new album being released in November.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so
because
it's the link that I shared in the notes, and so it got me looking and kind of catching up. And I had already known, so back in 2017, the lead vocalist Chester Bennington committed suicide, and the band had been pretty much on hiatus since then. They had done some tribute performance, and they've had released releases of some things here and there. Like they weren't completely dormant, so to speak. But there was not. It wasn't like we're planning to do something either. And so I was kind of caught by surprise when I saw that there was going to be a new album in a little over a month. And I caught the video of the new lead vocalist performance.
It's a woman.
And it was, Emily, her name's Emily Armstrong.
That's awesome.
And she sounded great for Linkin Park, even though it did not sound like she was trying to emulate Chester's voice at all.
Right.
It's kind of an odd feeling, I think, because like I could listen to her perform the original stuff and recognize it for being Linkin Park and being different in a way that didn't try to, replace the original vocals. And then hearing her on the original or the single release from the upcoming album, it was like, it works. It's kind of an odd feeling, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's like when she screams like Chester would do at points, it sounds appropriate and sounds different and the same at the same time, which is kind of an odd compliment, right? Like it's not an emulation thing, but it's a complementary thing, and that's what I appreciated about it. And so I'm looking forward to the new album. I went ahead and pre-ordered a physical copy. Not that people do that all that often anymore, but I did it because I went ahead and ordered the vinyl with it.
Oh, nice.
Just because it would be fun to have, not for any specific fidelity purposes. And so I'm looking forward to hearing that. But that's all I really had about it. I just wanted to ask because my sons also suddenly enjoyed some of their music.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I do enjoy it. I want to hear how she sounds. I want to hear how they have gotten. I want to hear that. So it sounds cool. It kind of makes me a few of the thoughts that I had while you were telling me that were about Audioslave, because it was their second album. I think I like the songs from their first album better, but I think their second album is a better, more cohesive album as far as like if we're gonna judge like how an album should sound. So not necessarily about preference and likes and dislikes, but just about quality. But it made me think of that because you've got the three instrument players from Rage Against the Machine with Chris Cornell from Soundgarden on vocals. And so the first album sounds very much like the singer from Soundgarden playing with Rage, and so it's whereas the second album is a little they carved away and created an identity for themselves a bit better musically than in the first album. So that's kind of what I thought about, and I kind of will probably listen to that album with that kind of thinking, with that in the back of my head, or maybe on the forefront of my mind. But that was interesting. How the other thought I had was to ask you how familiar you are with CCM.
I wouldn't say I'm extremely familiar, but I do. There's a passing familiarity. I would put it that way.
So I got high over the weekend, and I found that when I get high, I really, really enjoy listening to music more than when I'm sober. And I listen to music when I'm high. I listen to music like I did when I was a teenager. I have that kind of enjoyment. And whereas now, like, if I get in the car, I'm usually wanting to listen to a podcast. Sometimes I want to listen to music. Usually it's a podcast. And but I was listening to music, and I often go back to listening to music that I liked when I was a kid, which was almost all contemporary Christian music. And I went down a rabbit hole reading about DC Talk. I don't know if you remember them.
Vaguely. and I certainly remember the name, but I don't know the context I remember.
They are by far the most popular CCM artist as of today. I don't think that they've ever been outsold. And they were, they had I think they had some double platinum records. My memory is not is failing me in the details, but they're definitely the most, as far as like how many albums ordered and so forth, they're definitely most popular CCM artist. And I was listening to some of their albums. So they're interesting because they got together at Liberty University, which is fairly conservative university out in Virginia. They had a couple of hip hop albums. There are two white guys and a black guy. I think they even have a song called "Two Honkies and a Negro." It's not a song. It's like a little bump music in between a couple of songs. So they have two hip hop albums. Then they had a third album, which is their third album got might have been their first platinum album, and it went platinum. It took a few years, but they introduced a little more rock into it. But it's still heavily influenced by hip hop. And then their most popular album was released at the end of 1995. It was called Jesus Freak. It went gold in the first 30 days, ultimately getting double platinum. And it was straight up grunge inspired alternative music. So there's a little bit of rapping in the songs, but it is not hip hop. You cannot call it hip hop. And it's just that was the first album I heard by them. So when I went back, I was like, okay, I like this music. This is awesome. Like, it really is musically a fantastic album, and coming from a person who doesn't know music. And I go back and listen to their previous album, which was very popular, and I'm like, this is musically very different. And it just sort of represented how quickly things can change. And then they had a fifth album that was not as well received because they did what they did with their first album. That was about it. And there was no way, there wasn't any, by the time that they released that one in 1998, grunge was not popular, and they did not find the thing that was very popular for the late 90s. So I think I remember buying it, pre-ordering it or whatever, buying it on day one and hating it because it was so different. But having gone back and listened to it, it's not as bad as it's musically not as bad as I thought it was when I first got it. But I went down that road. But so why I brought them up at all is the At some after that last album, they went on a permanent, or they went on hiatus, and they've been on hiatus since I guess 2000. I think they've gotten back together at least twice to play concerts on a cruise ship, and but they've also got two of the members have gone on to front two of the most a couple of incredibly popular CCM bands, Audio Adrenaline and the Newsboys. So might have heard of those, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, those don't sound familiar. But then again, in more recent memory, I haven't paid any attention
From about the age of 12 to 18, that's all I listened to was CCM.
Did you ever listen to Petra?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, they were about the only ones that I really listened to for a while, as far as what I would classify in that category. And then I do not remember his name. There's someone relatively recently that I came across. It's a single artist. I'll have to go back and look. Maybe it'll be I doubt it'll be follow-up for a show. Maybe I'll just send you a text. But I'll look him up. But some of his stuff was actually pretty good. It's something that I've actually gone back to and listened to on occasion without any specific prompting. Like it's just, I feel like listening to that at the moment.
There's some good stuff out there. There was good stuff out there. There's a group that I listen to now still called Hoi Polloi. They're from New Zealand. They were really obscure, but they have like a mid-90s alternative, just not necessarily low production, but it's not like super polished. Not a great These are not great descriptors, but there's a rawness to it that comes from a lower budget that still sounds good. And I listen to them. If you like, 90s alternative, which was a incredibly broad term that I felt was misused a lot, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's classified as alternative,
it's everything.
In general,
everything with a guitar,
pretty much.
So I felt like it was. I feel like alternative. So I feel like alternative is not a genre so much as it was a movement that has a number of genres inside of it. Because it was, it's like, okay, so what are we words mean something. There was a reason why it was called alternative, and it was people that were looking for an alternative to the pop synthy music that was, defined the 80s.
It's been interesting over the past year or so how many or how little, how would I phrase that? If you think about in the 90s, maybe even early thousands, but specifically in the 90s, you had a very distinctive rock movement, and it doesn't sound like it continued. Like it almost sounds like a gap once that faded to today. But over the past year or so, a lot of those bands that you would think of when you think back to the 90s have been re-emerging or resurfacing in some way. Almost like we need another one of those movements to reintroduce rock to the world yet again. It's been kind of fascinating to look at because Seether has released a new album.
Oh, awesome.
Stained has released a new album. Mentioned, of course, Linkin Park, even though it's a different setup there. But it's kind of interesting where some of these are coming from. Metallica is coming back on the scene, even though it's been a re-release and some like guest performances of their songs. It was an interesting album for sure. I mean, where else are you going to hear someone like Chris Stapleton sing "Nothing Else Matters"?
That's awesome,
and actually do a really good job with it. So
I'm going to check that out.
But like it's just kind of interesting to see that transition, maybe, or recognition of a gap and kind of seeing how it's been filled. It's kind of the best way I have to describe it. But I'm on board. I've enjoyed a lot of the stuff that I've listened to recently that has been oh, this is what I've been missing because nothing that was released as a rock album really grabbed me for at least a decade. And we're kind of back to, oh, this is finally some good stuff again.
Yeah, I think, I definitely noticed the decline in guitar focused music happening toward the end of the aughts. And with the exception of maybe the Foo Fighters being a mainstay that are still around, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers will release some album, but the Red Hot Chili Peppers are just, they're all on their own. Like they don't sound like, they have lots of influences obviously, but they don't sound like anyone, and nobody sounds like them. But yeah, I think that's really cool to see that, because I did notice the decline, or the yeah, I don't want to say decline but I noticed that it's not.
I struggled with that too. It's more just a gap.
Yeah, decrease in the number of songs and albums in those type of genres, because the 90s were, I mean, like the music from the 90s was perfect for me. Like I was like right in the right spot. If I was a little bit older, I could have, seen some more shows that I really would have liked. But that was definitely the music that I have, over all the decades that we've listened to. That's the music that I like the most. I love grunge. And then I'm kind of the trash that listens to new metal that came at the end of the decade, which wasn't as big a movement, but that is the most popular, I think, that heavier music has been in all of recorded music's history.
Metal is such a fascinating genre in general to me.
Well, I mean, they have, I can't think of any genre that has more subgenres.
Yeah. Well, maybe depending on how you categorize R&B, because if you think about
that's fair,
how it influenced a bunch of other genres, I wouldn't necessarily call them subgenres, but at the same time, you can make an argument.
Yeah. So the problem with me and having any sort of valuable conversation about R&B is that I don't, because I just simply do not listen to much R&B. Not because I dislike it. It's just, it's not where, so it's primarily lyric driven, and I am not a lyric driven music listener. I am a instrument driven music listener. So whereas, like I could listen to, like I can remember listening to the Chemical Brothers, and people that were riding in the car with me were like, this is just so repetitive. I'm like, no, listen to all the layers and how different, all the things that are going on here and there, and how it changes, and all the different effects and so forth. And whereas everyone else is like, it's just boom, 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 over and over and over again. Whereas, and for me, R&B is like that. It's just, I just hear words. There's not a lot of musical depth here. That's not always the case, but by and large for me, I want to say that the artistry that can be found in not just lyrics being sung by R&B singers, but the ability to use cadence and rhythm the way that they do is not entirely lost on me, but it is not something that I appreciate properly.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever talked about it on the show specifically, but I know we've talked about it in person. Um, because for me, I can go either way. I enjoy good lyrical music, and I enjoy good music for the sake of music. Always been fascinating to me, the people that don't see both, I guess. Not for any other reason than it's just kind of hard to imagine, like same way anybody else is. Like I know how I choose and listen to music, and it's tough a lot of times to imagine the other viewpoints, because there's plenty of things that I listen to specifically for the lyrics, and doesn't have anything to do with the music other than enjoying the accompaniment to the lyrics. And there are plenty of things on the other side of it that I listen to specifically for the music, and I couldn't sing a single lyric in the song. It doesn't register. Because that's not what I listen to it for.
Up until my mid 30s, almost all music lyrics didn't register for me. I had to like really focus to understand and decipher the words. And then sometimes, I in addition to that, I'd need to be reading the lyrics as they're singing them. And sometime in my mid 30s, like that shifted a little bit. I'm still primarily instrument. I still listen to music primarily for instrument, but I don't have to work nearly as hard to decipher lyrics to the point where like I think I'm like normal people in the sense that I don't have to quote unquote decipher lyrics anymore at all. I just hear the music, I hear the words for the most part. But I definitely do not have I don't have it. Memorizing lyrics and to be able to sing is difficult for me. If I have them in front of me, like reading like karaoke, I can do it really well and I could sing along with the song. But I can't do it with the album and the singer singing without the words in front of me easily, except for a few songs that sat down and memorized as a teenager. But there was a thing I was gonna say. I was gonna say that regarding R&B and all of its subgenres, is that I had to have it took watching a video from Vox where they break down various hip hop artists' songs and how clever the songs were written for me to truly recognize how genius some of these artists are. And like I just it was that type of music, like the genius. I keep using the word genius because I feel like it truly is. I feel like it embodies what Schopenhauer meant when talking about Wagner when I say it. But yeah, these artists are genius, and I didn't realize that until somebody put out a almost 10-minute video to break it down for me.
It can be tough to decipher. I think I'm maybe, I don't want to say blessed, but I like knowing that I can appreciate different things more because of some level of classical music training and then interest in continuing involvement within music, even if I'm not good at it, because it gives me a greater appreciation for what goes into how you develop a song, just the songwriting aspects in general, and how clever a lot of different artists are having that appreciation for what goes into production. So again, it's not even my realm. It's just I, via ancillary knowledge, have that appreciation for. And good example, that I'm not sure, I assume gets thrown around pretty often in certain circles, but the lyrical genius of someone like Marshall Mathers, Eminem being the stage name.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really give an appreciation to a lot of the lyrics because it's just somebody speaking, right? But if you take the time to dissect how he ended up actually performing and playing on the different lyrics, you get a much greater appreciation for the art of crafting the lyrics, more so than the performance itself. And the performance is a whole nother art layer on top of it, which really is just a long way of saying, yes, I agree.
Sorry if you're going to have to tone that down in post.
It's fine.
I would like to make a recommendation for you. I'll send you a link to this, but one of my favorite albums from the 90s that I can still listen to from my CCM days was an album called This Beautiful Mess by Sixpence None the Richer. I know you've heard that name. I'm fairly confident you've heard it.
Yeah, I know the band.
They had the song Kiss Me in a movie with Rachel Lee Cook. She's All That. I think that might have been the movie.
Well, they also used it in Dawson's Creek.
I wonder which one they used it first. Anyway, I didn't realize they used it in Dawson's Creek. That's one of the shows I have not watched.
I've watched bits and pieces of it for whatever reason.
I've seen some episodes.
I'm sure it was related to do with whoever I was in a relationship with at the time. But
yeah,
I don't remember feeling bad about it. Like it was enjoyable enough to watch. It was just not something I was going to watch on my own.
I was gonna say to them, it's their that album came out in '95. The album I mentioned, "This Beautiful Mist," came out in '95, and it is one of the best albums that I would say that encompasses what '90s music, what '90s rock should sound like. So that's why I like it so much. It's so good. But I also have an affinity for uh, airy female vocals.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I mean, so I've spent the past like 3 weeks listening to what I call hype music because I was doing it for the competition, just trying to get in the correct mindset, I suppose, for lack of better phrasing, which has predominantly been the Score and Warhol and Zayd Wolf. Um, Probably names that mean nothing unless you are specifically looking for what I would classify as hype music, which is upbeat rock, kind of grandstanding rock type of soundtracks with lyrics that talk about basically being the last man standing, or taking the fight to somebody, or whatever, like whatever you would think of as a walkout song for combat sports. If it fits that category, that's kind of what I was listening to. So I'm more than happy to take a break and listen to something else for a bit. Um, so I will certainly check it out. That being said, I'll probably be back on my hype playlist because I was not real happy with how things went over the weekend.
I gathered that from your message. Um, I would have thought that you would have been listening to the Immortals Techno Syndrome, otherwise known as Mortal Kombat.
There's a lot of music that I started off listening to that I changed the playlist completely because it was upbeat and enjoyable, but it wasn't trying to reinforce the mindset of I'm stepping on a mat to engage in some level of combat kind of thing. And I can't listen to Mortal Kombat without just having video game flashbacks constantly. So it doesn't have that same effect.
That was totally a joke because that song is not great and that movie was not great, but it's the only song that I can think of that has anything to do with I don't want to say martial arts, but maybe hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, there's not a lot of variety out there. Okay, come to find out. Like I mentioned a few, but Papa Roach has only one or two songs that I think made it into the playlist. I don't even think Seether had anything that I decided to make it into the playlist. And, those are bands I would typically go to for something more edgy and rock sounding. And it didn't fit what I was looking for to reaffirm and set a mental space to be in. And I mean, we can talk about all that as well, but what it comes down to, just to boil it down to kind of a sentence or two, there's a different level of competition depending on the organizing body, and this particular organizing body is the one that most people pay attention to because of the professionalism of the athletes involved. Which means when I get there, I get there early and I'm walking around just kind of familiarizing myself with the venue, and watching a couple of matches and paying attention to how quickly injuries occur as opposed to other competitions where it's maybe not quite so quick, and start getting in my head a bit. So I have to leave the competition arena and go back out into the lobby, put my headphones in, and listen to that music just to recenter and be not anxious about what I'm about to do. And so that's the kind of music I was looking for, something to serve as kind of a calming effect to a point, but not really be a calming experience as much as you know what you're doing, you're here to engage in some level of combat, and you need to be the last person standing kind of just message over and over. Because it helps reduce the anxiety for me in that situation, because I can focus on the music and being kind of hyped up for what is to come instead of being in my head about the ramifications if I fuck something up, more or less. And And so it's a whole different beast, really. But that being said, that genre of music, there's just not a lot out there. And what is out there all sounds the same. And so I don't know if it's good or bad, but because it all sounds the same, it got to a point where half of it I wasn't paying any attention to. And there were 3 or 4 songs that I actually legitimately paid attention to because they served the appropriate purpose. And so I need to, prior to my next competition, I need to sit down and whittle down a playlist to just the handful of songs that actually assist with that mindset and just let those go on repeat.
I wanna make mention. You said that Challengers was some music you were listening to. I gotta say that album is fantastic. I haven't even seen the movie, but the album is fantastic.
Which one?
Challengers. I thought you said.
I was trying to think of the movie.
Isn't I'm fairly confident that it's from a tennis movie.
I mean, it's ringing a bell, but I'm not so sure. I may just not have seen the movie. That may be the thing.
I haven't seen the movie, but I definitely have listened to the soundtrack. It's a romantic sports drama that follows a love triangle between an injured tennis star turned coach and her low circuit tennis player ex-boyfriend and her tennis champion husband across 13 years of their shared relationship.
Yeah, I certainly have not seen it. So that may be why I was drawing a blank. But
it came out this year.
That explains quite a bit. I haven't paid attention to movies in a couple of years.
So I happened to be in a, so I think we're talking about the score. It's like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Yeah.
Okay. One Sunday morning, Beck and I, or maybe Saturday morning, I don't know, doesn't matter. Beck and I were like, let's go get a bagel from Crestline Bagel for breakfast. And so we go to Crestline Bagel, and I walk in, and this song is playing. I think it's the final song on the album. And I'm just like, this music is awesome. And like, I can't order. They're having to wait on me to order because I was like, I have to find Shazam and figure out what this song is. And the guy was there. He's like, yeah, this song, we play the whole album every day. He's like, we don't play it all day, but we play it every day because it's important. It's a great album. And so the folks there did not care at all that I was slowing things down because I was trying to figure out what album this was. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, what's funny is I didn't even realize who was there, who was behind the music, even though I should have, just based on all the other projects they've been involved with under different names that sound, I'm not going to say the same because they don't sound the same, but there are enough elements there that I should have been able to pick it out.
Right. There, when you hear anything that Trent Reznor's done, it's like, like Challengers versus Nine Inch Nails versus the collaboration he did in the late 90s with David Bowie. It doesn't sound the same, but there is a familiarity between all three of those, the music in all three of those albums. And it's because it comes from the same brain.
I don't know that I have anything to follow that with specifically on music.
Well, do you want to talk about the competition?
I can. I feel like they could be either really quick or really long. But I mean, since we've alluded to it, probably the one main thing that I would say, it's interesting to be in a space where Saturday, when my matches were scheduled, and I was pissed after the match, but I wasn't pissed at the result because it wasn't so much that I thought it was unfair at all. It was that I got flustered and made bad decisions that I recognized both in the moment and in retrospect. That's what made me angry. Because had I not gotten flustered and made bad decisions, it could have been more even. I probably still would have had the same results just because of the disparate levels of preparedness. And that was, a conversation after the matches between me and individuals and just knowing where they were and everything else that helped make it easier to accept, but it doesn't change the fact that I was very angry with my decision making, which made it really difficult to walk away from the competition with any sense of pride or fulfillment or anything else positive. It was just I made bad decisions and I don't like this. Um, and same night, like get back to the hotel, and I was already looking up dates for the next close competitions that I would consider driving to, and already have hotels reserved actually because I can cancel them if I choose not to. But it's that kind of I went there to do a thing, and instead of doing a thing, I made really bad decisions, kind of pseudo doing a thing, and I'm angry with myself because I know better, being the end result and takeaway, instead of paying attention to the fact that I still walked away with third place and should be quite happy that I'm willing to engage in a competition that could very well see me injured or,
Seriously injured.
otherwise damaged. Yeah. And at 45, and I don't bat an eye from that. I think there's a certain amount of pride that should come from just being willing to go compete. And I get that, especially given how few people compete in the sport alone, much less population at large, right? We were talking about it at the gym today, actually, that the average number of people who train in jujitsu is something like 20 maybe percent of the population if you're being overly uh, what's the word overly if you're overestimating by a significant amount, just saying that maybe 20% engage in the occasional training in a martial art, much less subdividing it into jiu-jitsu. And of the people who train in jiu-jitsu, you have a roughly 8% number, if you take like gym attendance and everything else, like how many people are registered practitioners that go on to compete. So I'm a part of, less than 10% of the people who practice the art to begin with engaging in this activity. And there is a certain amount of pride to be taken from just being willing to engage in something that is done by a very demonstrable statistical handful of people, right? But it doesn't change the fact that I'm immersed in this world to a point where I see the problems with my decision making, and I knew better a year ago. So what happened to get me to a point where I still made bad decisions even though I knew better? And that irritated me beyond any rational point, which is why I disliked everything about the weekend. That said, I still had a good time. I met some great people. I enjoyed the time away from the competition mats. Like, it's not that the weekend was bad. It's just that I recognized a problem for me, which is if I'm going to compete, it can't be a one-off here and there. There's obviously a different mindset and different presence needed and different decision-making process involved that I have to keep trained and at the forefront of my mind, maybe for lack of better phrasing, in order to be happy with performance. And I'm just not there because last time I competed was a year and some change ago. And overall, it just means that I need to either decide to specifically address the mindset issue and try again with with that mental change in approach effective, or it may also be that it's kind of like the art itself, where it takes a number of times competing to kind of recognize the difference and be able to shift between modes. A lot of question marks, but what it comes down to is just that at the end of the day, I didn't like my decision making and I knew better. And so I want a chance to redeem that feeling, if you will.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. I can't say I know enough to, like, It's really interesting because um, I get the idea of like you could have won everything, but been disappointed with how you competed because you expected different from yourself, versus you could lose everything and be incredibly satisfied with your performance. And I find that to be a really interesting dynamic that we often see in I get
Yeah,
the idea.
it's kind of funny because if you talk to enough people that are enmeshed in this world in some way, you'll hear the same thing over and over. Unless you're a black belt, competition is just there for you to go and enjoy competition and do what you seek to do in that arena, right? It's the result just doesn't matter. At black belt, you're judged a little bit differently, not because the competition matters significantly more, but because if you set out to do what they call the open class, where there aren't weight and age brackets involved, it's just everybody who is a black belt can compete in this particular division. If you set out to do the open class division, there's an expectation of how you'll perform and what you'll do. If you're not doing that, if you're segmented by age and weight and all the other categories to make it semi-fair, there's maybe more of an expectation as a black belt to be successful, but it's not what I would consider overbearing any more than what any one person would put on themselves. But outside of that, like everything else that you hear people talk about are the result doesn't matter. The fact that you even go out there and compete is the result. And it's fascinating to think about how accurate that is from a theoretical standpoint and what it means for people in general, and how completely wrong it is sometimes from an individual standpoint when you have some very specific thoughts on how you should or shouldn't perform. And I think that's the same with any competition, even just basic skill-based ones where you're performing against time or something else that can't necessarily react to you or affect you. It's just you trying to be better than somebody else doing the same activity. I think you can still have that same individual problem with performance, and that's not unique to the art. But what is unique is that you could have the inverse of that, where you could have a phenomenal performance and not succeed at all and still be happy with it because at the end of the day, your opponent was just better in that particular arena, and you can recognize and appreciate it because that was something that was a gap that you didn't know how to address. Where I had major problems with it is that I had specifically trained for 3 or 4 different scenarios, and the one scenario that I knew was problematic that I didn't have a good answer for was the scenario I was presented with, and I didn't like how it unfolded. And so, my in the next 2 months before Nashville in November, my specific focus is okay. I know this is a weakness. I need an answer for it, even if I'm not good at it. Just knowing I have an answer for it and being able to progress from that into potentially something else will be enough for me to feel good about how the match unfolds. My opponent may still be better. I may still not do any better than I did in Atlanta, but if I have a good response instead of a response that I should have known better about, that makes the difference. And having that type of nuance be how you grade performance is something that I don't see in pretty much anything other than a combat focused competition. I'm sure there's something else that where that nuance exists, but I certainly can't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah, without breaking the flow of what you were talking, like I did find it interesting that you, in the notes, you'd mentioned that that a good, an effective way, the comment about the nature of jujitsu being not just defending yourself, but also defending your opponent. And I thought that was really interesting. And I'd like, yeah, I don't know. Do you have more to say about that than the note, the bullet point you have?
I do. So the article was just kind of fascinating that I stumbled across it post competition, and this was an article on Men's Health where their director of fitness, I don't know, somebody within the Men's Health organization decided to engage in a competition, and some of the takeaways were just kind of interesting to read as someone who recognized them for what they were, but was much further along as far as time goes in their journey. But the particular bullet point that you're mentioning is part of what attracted me to training jiu-jitsu in the first place, because the idea isn't so much akin to how do I destroy my opponent or the aggressor coming at me. It's how do I control the situation, and how do I control it in a way that I don't get hurt primarily, but secondarily, how do I control it in a way that my aggressor maybe can walk away from it too. And that's not common in most martial arts. Most martial arts are very much a protect the self and get away, and that's it. That's kind of the focus of what is taught. Whereas it's not quite what is taught with regard to jiu-jitsu in its various forms, but specifically Brazilian jiu-jitsu, where the idea is just to control the situation. So you control engagement, you control where you end up in position, and then if you have no other recourse, you go for some level of submission. And most of the time, you're going to go for a choke because it's not something that's going to cause permanent damage. If you choke somebody, you knock them unconscious, you can subdue them. By the time they regain consciousness, there might be some minor ancillary issue with having been unconscious for a moment, but it's not going to be a long-lasting detrimental effect. There are still techniques that are taught that are absolutely all about shattering joints and bone, which are detrimental to the person on the receiving end, obviously. But when you control the situation, chokes are a big part of it, right? And so the comment in particular was talking about the author of the article talking to a senior practitioner at the same gym that he went to. And it was kind of interesting to think about how, as a byproduct of how we are taught to control the position and the situation, it makes it safer for both me as the person being attacked and my aggressor, because I'm not immediately going for a debilitating strike or trying to club them to death with an elbow or whatever the traditional response would be. Instead, I'm trying to eliminate their ability to cause damage to me and eliminate their ability to move. And that's kind of the defining characteristic of jiu-jitsu as a whole. And so it's control the position, control the situation, and then if you need to, you take it a step further and you create a submission.
It's a really interesting approach to hand-to-hand combat. I think it's pretty cool.
It does backfire a little bit when you think about the competition circuit, because you have to be a bit of a dick and you have to go for that submission. And I think my biggest weakness, and this goes back to performance over the weekend, I don't necessarily want to hurt my opponent, right? Like I train with people that I know and enjoy their company, and I don't want to cause them bodily harm. And there's a difference between training in the class structure and going to compete, because the competition is really I don't know this person's motivations. I don't know this person's approach. As far as I know, they're out to break my arm or whatever, right? Like, there's no way for me to know without a conversation in advance. And you're not going to have the conversation in advance, because then you then you set other expectations and you're playing a mental game, and that isn't going to happen. Instead, you're going to have two people who step on the mat with maybe saying hello and being friendly with a handshake, and then they're going to just engage in all-out warfare, for lack of better phrasing. I think my biggest problem is that I don't know how to compartmentalize the be nice version of me that exists in training, that's trying not to, hurt someone intentionally, but trying to still learn the techniques, and the, all right, be respectful, but you've got to go for it like it's a fight kind of version of me that needs to exist for the competition. And I think just multiple competitions will help create that segmentation. And that's where trying to do more than one every year or so will make a big difference.
Oh, yeah. I think the more you do, the more you, one, develop your game plan, and two, also become more attuned to the environment.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because there was a big difference in feeling between the first competition I did with a different organizing body and this one, where this one, it felt like there was a jump in professionalism. The type of person involved was either at least a semi-regular competitor or a professional competitor. And there's just a different approach and feel to it as a result. And even though I thought I was prepared for it, I think I just walked into it with a bit more of a unpreparedness or lack of preparedness from the mental aspect than I really thought I had.
When you said that, it made me think of Basher from Ocean's 11 saying, it'd be good to work with proper villains again.
Yeah. I can see the correlation, because it did feel that way. Going back and watching the match, the recording of the match after the fact, did not look as bad as I felt like in the moment. But I think it's because I've at least reached a point where in the moment I see mistakes in the decision-making process pretty regularly and pretty apparently for what it is. But watching it back and seeing the chosen responses as opposed to what in the moment I maybe should have done, they weren't horrible. It just wasn't right. And it was something that I knew better in the moment and just didn't execute that way in the moment. And I think it's a hallmark of learning and understanding the art, for sure. At the end of the day, I'm still a beginner. It's tough to think about a little over 2 years in, and it's one of the few martial arts that you can get that far in and still technically be very much a beginner and not truly understand a large amount of what the art entails. And you kind of start to recognize how much more there is and how little you will ever know at each of the different levels around this point. To put it in perspective, in talking to multiple different black belts who have at least 8 or 10 years or more of experience in the art, most of them are in the 20 to 30 year range as far as the people that this particular topic has been broached with for me personally. And it's the answer is always the same. It's, I might be a master in one or two techniques, and specifically in one or two situations. I know about a whole bunch of other ones, but only these one or two specific situations are where I really am absolutely great at. And so my entire purpose in a match is to try to get to those situations so that I can play my absolute best decision-making progressions. And when you kind of recognize that being the bar, it starts to really be kind of stupid to be disappointed with any performance for someone who's only been training for a couple of years. But it's the human aspect that encroaches on, but I know better. Like I can see it in the moment. There was a better decision to be made. That's the problem. And it's just a fascinating art from that standpoint.
So let me ask, why, what about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? Does it take longer to master?
It's tough to answer it specifically, so I'm going to try to explain it in a way that might make sense, and you'll have to tell me if it does. Um, one position, just breaking it down. If I am on top of my opponent, they're on the ground. I am straddling across their upper body in some fashion, seemingly a dominant position. It's referred to as the mount. From that position, there are hundreds of different ways to perform different submissions on different body parts just on what's exposed. So you could have multiple different ways to choke, multiple different ways to isolate an arm and break, like wrist or elbow or shoulder, depending on which technique and how you perform it. And a lot of that is influenced based on how the opponent defends. So if the opponent puts their arm in one place and kind of isolate or locks it down in one way, there's one technique or a series of techniques to break that defense and then create a submission depending on which one you're going for. And what it comes down to is that all of these different things have kind of the same finishing goal, right? Like a choke is restricting blood flow or oxygen to the neck. Like that's the pure definition of a choke. But there can be, from one position, like, you on top of your opponent, 100 different ways to choke depending on what you have access to and what you can grab. Compound that with, if I am across my opponent perpendicular or vertically, where my head is on their chest, or I have them controlled by me being on their back and keeping them from moving and turning toward me, or I'm on the ground and I have my legs locked around them to control them in a position, or maybe I have control of clothing and I'm using that to keep half their body at bay. The nuances of all these different ways to control a person and still create an attack that's effectively a version of the same thing means that there are just so many different combinations that it's difficult to understand what's similar between all those conversations in a short time, or combinations in a short time. So over time, you start to learn that in this particular scenario, I'm using material around the neck to constrict on one side, and I'm using wrist on the other, and I can do it by doing this particular motion, kind of thing. The concepts remain the same, but how you execute is so different depending on the nuance of the situation that it's time consuming to learn all those different bits and pieces of nuance. Hopefully that answers, because it's really difficult to describe verbally. It's a lot easier to show examples in person.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I understand. I think I get the high level understanding of why it takes so long, because there's just so much.
Because the easiest way I could think to describe it is you think of breaking somebody's arm by performing some maneuver with pressure at the back of the elbow and shattering it, right? Like in and of itself, that would be what you would think of from just movie exposure. Probably something from Aikido or maybe even karate, where you keep the arm from moving at the wrist so that you can apply pressure on the elbow and cause damage.
Right. You apply more pressure than the structures are capable of handling.
Right. So if you think about jiu-jitsu being an art where you find the different ways to do that regardless of what position you're in. So if someone throws you, And so you land on your back on the ground and then have to readjust and reach a position where you could then grab their arm to break it. What does that look like? As opposed to maybe you're the one who is able to throw somebody to the ground and then you go to break the arm. Or, someone punched you and you're kind of dazed and then took you down, but then sat on top of you. How could you change that position to turn around and break the arm? And then you think about, how do you do those same things with a wrist? How do you do those same things with a shoulder? How do you do those same things with a choke instead of going after the joints? How do you do the same thing with a knee? And there's just a lot of different situations where, the concept remains the same. The action of performing X amount of force in this direction on this joint is going to create a problem. But how do you create that force from all these other positions? That's where the nuance comes in. And so a lot of it is also, if you're in this position and you're going for this type of submission or attack, how do you keep your opponent from being able to defend against it? So how do you control their ability to move this direction to escape it? Or how do you keep them from being able to pull their arm in and cross arms so that you can't attack an arm if that's what you're going for? All those different things kind of factor into it as hundreds of variations on the same thing, but then being able to execute that particular submission in light of all these different variations is where the time comes into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you did a better job explaining it than you thought you might have.
Probably, because it's so... One of the things I constantly am amazed by is how much I understand and don't understand at the same time.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sure I'm not getting the subtle nuances as if you were able to show this is how you do this, and this is all the variations that I know of, and here are some that I can get how saying it is one thing, but seeing it can be so much more eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's one thing that I do like is that I think I mentioned it before, where a couple of weeks ago I taught my first class as well.
You did.
One of the things I really like about that experience is that I understand so much more having to think about how to teach it than I do just going and learning. And I really appreciate the ability to do that within the particular gym environment that I'm in, because not all gyms have the same program to allow someone to experience that. And I think that's going to be a huge boost long term to my understanding of a lot of the nuances, because there are a lot of things that I find myself doing that I don't actually know why. I just know that it works. And figuring out how to explain why I do those things and why it works is just an added benefit to being able to teach it to someone else that I think long term will make my understanding and absorption of the different techniques and concepts even quicker. But, we'll see. Time will tell. But it's just one of those things I've noticed over the past few weeks that really does make a difference, because it forces me to think about things that I haven't thought about. Because at this point, with a couple of years in, there are some things that I do kind of naturally without thinking about them. But then when someone questions it, I have to be able to stop and think about, okay, why do I do that when that's not how I used to do it? Or it's not something that would have come to mind when I first started, because it's not a quote unquote natural movement outside of the art. And that's been a huge benefit.
Yeah, the beginning of what you were saying here made me think of the saying, see one, do one, teach one. And my experience has been the things that I have taught are the things that I understood the best. I can remember being a TA in college for an anatomy lab, and I remember the section, the brain and nervous system anatomy is what I did worst in as a student, but it was like it clicked and all came together for me when I was teaching it. And I was just like, I think I was more excited learning it as I taught it than I was for anyone else in that class and when I took the class. And so, teaching someone how to do something is really where you learn how to do it yourself a lot of times, or can be.
Yeah, for sure. I've been surprised how much I've enjoyed teaching in general. So
we have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.